be told, since I was 8 or 9 years old. We sailed away. White stone on a mirror at home, black pond, and I wish it no more.
Okay, we started the day with a visit to the pasta factory. It was a large pasta machine with a crank arm with a broken shaft. Sam called me and said, "Oh, can you do some welding?" I said, "Yeah, sure can." He said, "Can you come and have a look in the factory and see if we can do a welding job there?" I said, "Sure can." So I went there and I saw what the problem was. Well, this crank arm shaft has broken away. Somebody's tried to weld it in the past, but really, as you can see here, that was the inner weld inside there. This is this sleeve slides onto the gearbox, and that drives. This plate holds it in place so it doesn't float backwards and forwards. There's other chain gears goes on there as well, and this oscillates and it operates this arm which moves part of the pasta machine backwards and forwards. Don't ask me exactly how or what, but that's the way it goes. So I'm unable to do this type of repair. I have to find the root cause of the problem, and in this case what we're going to do, we're going to we're going to have to remove this plate and bearing and gear, and then what I'll do is I'll set it up and clean this hole out, get rid of all the cancer and clean the hole out and ream it out, and then make a new stub shaft to fit on here. On the other side, it had a retainer and a retainer washer, and obviously 2 screws in here as well. So all that's been destroyed. And then the main plate that covers over there, of course, this whole thing's been wobbling backwards and forwards and bashing and crashing and so forth. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to rebuild this today, so Sam can get his pasta machine back up and running again. Well, we've got this part from the pasta machine up on the mill now, because we need to remove this plate in order to be able to get to the back of the main shaft and oscillating flange. And in order to do so, we have to remove this gear off here. Now this chain cog, it has 4 tapered pins in it. I've discovered that after I'd cleaned all the grit and rubbish off, that there's 4 pins in here, and they're all driven in, and they don't daylight out into the shaft. So and they turned out to be hardened pins. So I've got a 3mm end mill in at the moment, and I've started a hole. I'm going to progressively go up a little bit, being tapered, so we need to get all the way through with not too big a hole, and we'll do all 4 of these, and then we'll be able to remove this this gear off here. Good morning, this is Bruce, and welcome to my shop. This is a continuation of the repairs for pasta machine. This is the 4th pasta machine breakdown in 3 different factories that I've had to deal with. So it started off with, "Can you come here and do a welding job?" I went to have a look at it. I said, "No, I can't do that. I've got to get to the root cause of the problem and do a proper repair," which I've shown part of that in the previous movie. At any rate, before I go into detail, I want to wish a healthy recovery to Keith Fenner and to John Mills, both of our YouTube in our YouTube group, and also anybody else out there that's feeling a bit poorly. I think Tom Zelikman's suffering from insomnia. I need to have a chat with him when I catch up with him next this June coming, and explain to him how he can burn the candle at both ends and in the middle, and still have a bit of a snooze. So I'm going to show you the problem, what the problem was, what I've come up with as a solution, and also a couple of tips on what to look out for, and sticking with our 7 P's, as I always say. Proper preparation and planning prevents piss poor performance. So without any further ado, we'll focus in on the table, and I'll give you a quick review of where we're at, getting close now to completing this job. I'll just swing that down and I'll bring it in a bit more, a bit closer. I'll lock all that up so it doesn't wander. So you're not going to see me, but you're only going to see the parts. Maybe even bring it in a fraction more. There we go. Okay. So what we've done is, what we had is, excuse me, this is part of the pasta machine, and when I came there was a this cam arrangement, the stub axle in it, and they wanted to weld it up. It's already been welded before and it failed. So what I did was I removed this whole axle part, which fits onto the shaft. Excuse me. Fits onto the shaft of the gearbox coming through from the other side, and it has a locking device on here as well. So we pulled that arm, similar arm to this one, pulled all that out, and we brought it here. We've now stripped everything, cleaned it, and I'll show you the parts. But I've used this photo as a reference to make sure when I come to pull it together again, I don't have to do it more than once. So that's a handy bit about taking photos. So the first issue we had was this was the stub shaft that I found there. Of course, over years the welding has broken on the inside, and because they couldn't get into it, they've tried to weld it on the outside, and that's failed. It must have been wobbling for a long time, because this shaft should be longer and have a circlip in it to hold the bearing on. And so what I found was the washer that holds on there, and should be held on with a circlip. As you can see, it's all been metal on metal, been rubbing against, it's been popping out and bouncing around against the plate that covers it, a cover plate, a large cover plate. And so somebody's also attempted, and they've drilled in here and they've put 2 countersunk screws in to try and hold this. All of this is, instead of getting to the root cause, pulling it apart and making a new shaft and fixing it. So this is the shaft that I took apart, and this is the little stub shaft that I machined up, and this morning I've welded it in place. So that on that shaft is two items. This is bearing, and this twin chained cog. Now when this was all covered in grease, of course, so when I went to add it, also on the outside of the bearing is this large plate that holds everything in place, and works as a secondary bearing for the unit. So to support the shaft, the extended shaft of the gearbox. Now, once I got all the grease off, what I discovered was all other gears that we took off, and cogs and so forth, had grub screws in them, but this one had 4 pins in it, and this was pinned onto the shaft through four holes in the periphery, so that gear slid on there. So the first thing I did after I'd cleaned it, and before I took the pins out, was I marked the gear. Let me just find it. There it is there. So I marked the gear here, and I also marked it at the corresponding spot. The corresponding spot on the shaft there. So I know when I come to offer that gear up, it's going to be in the right position, because I don't know whether the orientation of these four holes in here are perfect. In order to get this apart, because there's a different size hole between the cog and in the shaft here. So I set this up in the milling machine and I milled out those 4 pins. And then what I've done is I couldn't get the right length one, so I bought 4 pins and I've cut them shorter. And I'm about to grind them just to complete a chamfer on the back, and then I'll introduce the cog and fit it. And what I've also done is I've made a new washer to go on the end of that stub shaft. This is the crank. This is the crank, and I've fitted 2 new bearings in there. I've bought 2 new bearings and fitted them in. And so what needs to happen? The bearing is going to go on first, and then the cog's going to go on after it. And just to make sure that everything is in orientation, the bearing goes into this plate. So I need to make sure that this plate is in the correct position relative to the shaft, so I don't have a problem afterwards. So hence I've pulled out and printed the photo I took when I first arrived at the pasta machine. So there you have it. So there you have it, and we will put all this together and assemble it tomorrow morning in the factory so they can get back on to their job again. So everybody else have a great weekend. The elections are over. People just need to get over it and get on with themselves. There's 4 years that'll prove all sorts of things. I don't believe there'll be a 3rd World War, and I don't even believe those that are on the dole there, or those that are getting handouts, they're the ones that are creating all the issues at the moment, and they should settle down. But unfortunately, the media has got nothing else to do, but they'll fire up the barbecue and just keep this going on, and that's very unfortunate. All the best.
Forgone, might need to belong. The dawn is buried below. Instead of raising the stakes, caught out on the easy way. Perplexed face of the human race, the dire taste, and I'm facing disgrace. It all collision course. One scathe and the blood remains, one scar and it don't wash away. Hello, sadness is base. Instead of raising the stakes, cop out on the easy way. Double bass lying in decay. Bottom down is my nature of way. Sailed away, prudence on from home. Red dust seeps into my hole below the door. Take me back. Later on, I called the mines my